Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are jumping right into a massive federal court ruling. And this isn't just about trade or economics, it's about the very limits of presidential power. We've got a constitutional showdown on our hands, and it looks like it's headed straight for the Supreme Court.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The moment this ruling came down, former President Trump was on social media making his stance crystal clear. He's calling the court partisan, says the ruling is just plain wrong, and right away he's signaling, we're appealing. So right there, the stage is set for a really high-stakes legal fight.
All right, so let's move past the immediate reaction and get to the core of the news. What did the court actually decide here?
And here it is, the big headline. A federal appeals court has dealt a major blow to his signature trade policy. The ruling says that the vast, sweeping global tariffs he put in place are, in fact, unconstitutional. This is a huge decision with really massive implications.
So the big question is why? Why did the court rule this way? Well, to really get it, you have to look beyond the economics of it all. This whole case is about a fundamental line drawn by the U.S. Constitution.
So what's the core principle that's really being tested here? What's the legal reasoning behind this big decision?
It really all boils down to two words: checks and balances. You know, the whole idea the founders had that no single person or branch of government should ever have too much power? This case is a classic test of that very principle, digging into who really has the final say on taxing Americans with tariffs.
And the court didn't have to invent some new legal theory here. Their reasoning comes straight out of the Constitution itself. Specifically, Article 1, Section 8, which pretty explicitly gives Congress, not the president, the power to set taxes and tariffs.
You can think of it like this. A president can absolutely propose tariffs. They can negotiate trade deals. But the Constitution is really clear that only Congress has the ultimate authority to actually make them happen. The president can't just decide to do it on their own with the stroke of a pen.
And look, this wasn't just some misunderstanding of the rules. This sequence of events is absolutely critical to the case. During his presidency, Donald Trump actually went to Congress. He asked them for this broad tariff power. Congress looked at the request and explicitly said no. He then imposed the tariffs anyway, and that action is exactly what triggered this entire legal battle.
So what does this ruling mean in the real world? Let's zoom in on just how big this decision is and what the lawyers who actually won the case are saying about its significance.
First off, this wasn't a close call. The court sided with the plaintiffs with a decisive 7-4 vote. That shows there was a strong majority of judges who believed a constitutional line had clearly been crossed.
Now, this ruling doesn't get rid of all the tariffs. It strikes down what's being called the lion's share, those huge global tariffs that were always in the headlines. But some other specific tariffs that were imposed using different legal authorities, well, they weren't part of this lawsuit, so they get to stay in place, at least for now.
And this is a really crucial point. Neal Katyal, one of the attorneys for the plaintiffs, is framing this as something much bigger than politics. He's not saying we beat the other guy. He's saying this is a win for the Constitution itself, a win for the whole system of checks and balances that the founders designed.
So all of this leads to the one big question that everybody's asking. What happens now? I mean, this is a huge ruling, for sure, but it is not the end of the story.
So here's the road ahead. The court ruled the tariffs are illegal, but then they immediately paused their own decision to allow for an appeal. And here's a really interesting detail. They gave the government only 45 days to file that appeal. That's about half the normal time. It's a pretty strong signal that the court sees this as a really urgent issue that needs to be settled for good.
This basically leaves two very different options on the table. The first one is what you might call the constitutional path. That's what the court suggested. Go to Congress, make your case to the American people and their representatives, and get their approval. The second path is the court battle, the one that's already been announced. Appeal the decision and take this fight all the way to the Supreme Court.
And that leaves us with this final question. No matter what happens next, this case has already become a landmark moment in that long ongoing debate over the balance of power in Washington. So, is this going to be a final, definitive check on presidential power? Or is it just the next big chapter in a constitutional argument that's been going on since the very beginning of the country? We'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court has to say.